Okay, go.
Okay, he's ready.
Good afternoon. I'm Sister Bernice Schuetz. I'm the oldest girl in a family of children of Joseph and Justina Schuetz. And this is my youngest brother, Jim Schuetz. And we thought we would just kind of get reacquainted. There's 20 years difference in our age.
That's right.
When I grew up, our family was very full. We had a house that everybody had a bed at night, but you weren't alone in the bed. And as Jim grew up, there was a smaller family, so I just thought we'd kind of get acquainted to compare from what I remember of our family and what Jim remembers of his family. He sees mom and dad in a different way from what I did. So I'm going to ask Jim how he feels about, they've done an acreage, and I want to just see what Jim has an idea of what the world looked like from your point of view.
Okay. Well, I was born when we lived on the acreage out on West 31st Street, and we eventually moved into town when I was 13, so I spent roughly 13 years there. Some of the things I remember were that there was a woods a couple miles from our house, and I used to love to go out, walk in the fields and over to the woods and just be out in nature at night, often alone. And back in those days, I would have only been 10, 11 years old, and you were allowed to go out and do those kind of things. These days, I'm not sure that you'd allow a 10-year-old to go out and walk that far away from home. Another memory I have was my brother Mike and I. Mike was 2 years older than, or is 2 years older than I am. We had a paper route, and it was out in the edge of town, so there was quite a bit of distance between the houses. And our paper route was about 5 miles long, and I think we had around 40 customers, so you can imagine they were pretty spread out. And I think Mike was 11 and I was 9 when we started that, because I believe I remember our dad driving us around on Sunday morning once in a while. And we each had a bag, and we'd get dropped off at the end of the day after school where the papers were, and put them in our bag, and then walk that route home delivering papers. I had a 2-mile section, and Mike had a 3-mile section because he was older. And again, I don't think you'd probably allow kids that age to be out delivering papers, and especially in a rural neighborhood like that. Let's see, what other memories do I have? Of course, all my brothers and sisters, and some of them I didn't realize when I was young that they were my brothers or sisters, because they're so much older, and I was actually playing with their kids. My oldest nephew, Paul, is only 2 years younger than I am, and I have 3 nephews that are 4 years younger than I am. So those were the kids that I played with quite often, and grew up with, and remember a lot of good times from then. We had I think we owned about 10 acres. Of course, had a big garden, and did a little bit of farming. I remember picking corn in the fall by hand. We had a wagon that we pulled behind the tractor, and would pick rows of corn and throw it into the wagon to feed the animals. At one point, I think we had pigs, although I don't specifically remember them. But we always had chickens, 2 or 3 milk cows, rabbits,
Big white ones.
big white rabbits that we would get friendly with, but then eventually we'd eat them. So you didn't want to get to loving them too much. And I remember some of the buildings that my dad built. He built the barn. He built the top of our garage, which included a workshop and a storage area. He put plumbing in our house. We didn't have indoor plumbing when I was growing up. I think he put that in when I was about 6, I think. So he was a pretty handy guy,
Yes.
and I think I got some of my handyman skills from him.
Yes, you certainly did. Yeah.
So, since we've been at this reunion, I've had some time to talk to my brother Ron, and he told me some things about my dad that I didn't know, and maybe you can elaborate on some of those a little bit. For instance, he said when he went off into the service, which would have been, I think, around 1950 or so. Our dad was working 2 jobs at the time. One was construction out helping to build the airport,
Yeah.
and the other was working at the stockyards. So maybe you can tell us a little more about what Dad was doing at the airport, because I had no idea that he ever did that.
Well, when I was 13 when we moved from a bigger farm in Minnesota, and Dad was whatever, 40, 41. This was in December of 41 when we moved.
Uh-huh.
And he was a tremendous farmer, knew animals, knew all of that. But there was no need for that in Sioux City. He wanted us to live closer to a bigger city as we grew up, so we'd have more opportunities. So there was no job, so he got hired digging ditches at the airport. That was his first job, and it wasn't at all what he was used to doing. So then he got a job at the stockyards, and the painful thing at the stockyards, he was a lover of animals. He took care of his cattle and horses and pigs and everybody, besides taking care of his family of 12.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So he drove what was called a cripple cart.
Okay.
These big longhorn steers would come in on the trail, on the railroad, and a train car, and they might gouge a steer or a cow next to him, and the cow would be harmed. So anyway, he drove the wagon in the stockyards to pick up those cows that had been, I say cows, whatever they were, steers.
Right. Animals that were injured.
Yeah, right. Animals that were injured. And that must have been painful for him. I don't think he ever complained, but to have a healthy farmer enjoying healthy animals.
Right.
And that's why he had 2 jobs. And we really, we were poor at that time, so he had trouble also with having a decent car, so he knew a lot about cars. He tried to help that way. We always had 500 baby chicks. We'd always get 500 baby chicks, and we'd eat the males and we'd have the females for laying eggs.
Right.
So we were taking care of that. So he had a lot of work to do, but you're right, he had 2 jobs, and he worked hard. It was hard. And he, instead of using 5 cents, he'd be on his feet all day. Instead of using 5 cents for a streetcar to come home, he would walk all the way home.
Oh, really?
Sometimes the
from
car
the
wouldn't be
stockyards?
working, from the stockyard.
Wow.
After a day's work. And for a while, I think he even carried, we couldn't afford good coal, he would carry those packaged square coal. I suppose all it was dust.
Okay.
Packaged into big square box. He would he'd get the car to the cemetery, and then he would have to carry those up, whatever it was, 6-8 blocks to the house.
Okay.
So he was a dedicated, foolishly dedicated, but I think his boys picked up that same thing from him. For building, like you said, and for caring for people and animals.
Yeah. Well, since I was only 9 years old when he passed away, I don't remember a lot about him. And since our mom lived to be 99, I sometimes think I wish I would have asked her more questions about him.
Yeah.
But I never did. So it was